Hey everyone, this is Nitro. In this video, I'm going to talk about the third and final faction that is good for PvE early on, which is the Princess Alliance, which is also referred to as the Waifu Squad. So, before I begin talking about the Princess Alliance though, I wanted to mention a few things that people have raised up in the comments of previous videos. First of all, factions do not matter until you hit player level 34, or that way your characters hit level 35, because it is only at that point where you unlock the faction buff for heroes who have that skill. For as an example, Luna is a faction buffer, so when she hits level 35, she can finally unlock her Pegasus Master class, which unlocks the faction buff skill. In this case, it's called Queen's Ascension. Until you get these skills, factions don't matter because you won't be able to buff characters of a specific faction. So effectively, before level 35, you can use any of the characters that you have. You don't have to worry about faction buffs at all, and be fine. Ideally though, you'll want to start leveling up characters that you plan to use and play, because that way you will not have wasted any of your experience potions. In this game, resources for upgrading your characters are very limited. And early on, one of the big limitations is the amount of experience potions you have to level up your characters. While in the later stages, you can have almost everybody leveled up, as you can see right here in my case, early on, you can only level up around 6 to 8 characters. And that's all the characters you'll be able to level up and have your characters remain at your player level. So that's why you need to focus down on 6 to 8 characters into your party, and that's it. No more. And the other thing about using only 6 to 8 characters is because of the major limitation in the number of runestones that you have. You basically only get the opportunity to get 2 runestones each month. Given each character you use pretty much needs 2 runestones for them to be usable, it's going to take you a while to get enough runestones to upgrade all the characters that you want to use. So once again, that's another reason to focus on only 6 to 8 characters, so that you'll be able to reasonably runestone up the core characters so that they have maximum stats and good utility as a result. So, with this covered, let's now begin talking about the Princess Alliance. So, there's actually several major limitations to playing the Princess Alliance early on, and I wanted to cover these in advance. First, the Princess Alliance pretty much requires you to have full SSRs in order to play. Empire and Legion of Glory can actually generally find SR characters or even rare characters to replace their SSRs. It's not optimal, but you can do it. For example, rather than using Ledin as a tank, you can get away with using, let's say, Grenier or Erin as your tank. Once again, it's not optimal, but it's doable for the early stages until you unlock Ledin. But in the case of the Princess Alliance, it's very, very difficult to find any replacements for any of the characters. So that's why, generally speaking, if you want to play Princess Alliance, you need to have all SSRs. The other major limitation of Princess Alliance is in fact the banner order. Let me just bring up the character banner release order once again. So, from this banner order, if you were to play, for example, Empire, you could very easily get the core Empire characters from the first week, from banner set number 1, because you'll have you'll have Bernhard and Leon right there. If you want to play Legion of Glory, you just really need the banner from banner set number 2, which gives you Ledin and Lyanna. However, in the case of the Princess Alliance, first of all their characters are basically spread out in separate banners. For example, You want Liana from this banner. You want Lena from this banner. You want Luna from this banner. You want Tieris from this banner. So there's no real banner that's purely focused on Princess Alliance characters only in the early stages of this game. It doesn't come until basically the banner set number 4 with Angelina and Shafanio. And in the case of Angelina and Shafanio, both of these characters actually, in my opinion, aren't 100% required. So that's a major limitation to playing Princess early on. Thus, what generally ends up happening, and what's recommended for most players who plan to play Princess Alliance, is you follow the Legion of Glory guide early on. That is, you try to draw for Leon, you try to draw for Ledin and Liana, and then you get that guaranteed Elwyn from the banner set 5. With that setup and combo, you're solid for the early and literally to the end game stages. And then you'll just slowly draw on focus banners to get the princess characters. For example, from this focus banner, you can get Luna, Lena, or Tieris. From this banner, you can get Angelina, because you'll have Liana and Cherie. Right? From the banner set 9 section, you can get Deidhart, Tieris, or Luna. And then over on the other side, you'll have Bozel, you'll probably have Lena, but if not, you'll get either Shafanio or Lena. So rather than playing Princess right from the start, it basically makes more sense to play Legion of Glory and then switch to Princess Alliance slowly but steadily. So, with that said, let's now jump back into the game and talk about the Princess Alliance at this point. One other thing about the Princess Alliance that you need to be aware of is that the Princess Alliance actually lacks a character that can remove buffs from an enemy. This actually, because they don't have any character that has a skill like Roar, which dispels 2 enemy buffs. This lack of a buff removal character actually makes it impossible for Princess Alliance to clear the high level Thunder Dragons, which can self-buff themselves and gives themselves a very high amount of attack and a good amount of defense. So, the way for Princess Alliance to generally kill the Thunder Dragons is they branch off into a separate faction. And there's 2 ways for Princess Alliance to do so. The first way is if you've went Legion of Glory at the start. In that case, you'll have Ledin and Elwyn. And what you would do is Elwyn will be your buff removal character with Roar and Sword Soul. And then Ledin will be the faction buffer. So he brings his Vindication skill, which is a faction buff, and he'll buff up the stats on Elwyn, so that Elwyn can basically solo kill the Thunder Dragon. The alternative to this is if your tank is the SR character, Freya. If she's your tank, Freya, while being part of the Princess Alliance, actually has a faction buff for Origins of Light. And Origins of Light has another buff removal character, which is Luin. So you're actually going to end up using a rare character, Luin, as your buff removal infantry. Because he has the Roar skill, just like Elwyn, and he also has a skill, Battle Cry, which dispels 1 buff from the enemy when he attacks. So Luin can basically take the place of Elwyn. Not perfectly, but it can work. Alright, so with this covered, let's now look at the Princess Alliance party. And generally speaking, Princess Alliance has 2 faction buffers. The first one is, of course, Luna, which is considered the best faction buffer for them. You generally use Luna in double class mastery. So you'll get Pegasus Master to unlock Queen's Ascension, but you'll generally use her as a Bowmaster early on, so that she can do ranged attacks. And the other faction buffer is Shafanio. Shafanio, in my opinion, is not a required character for Princess Alliance players, she's nice to have. But if you had the choice between using Luna or Shafaniel, I would say pick Luna for sure. And, you know, put Shafaniel as a reserve character. It's because her skills are kind of awkward. If you bring the faction buff for Shafaniel, you're basically forced to use only a single attack skill, and that will generally be Cleanse as a result, allowing her to do 1.5 times damage to enemies. And dispel 2 buffs for what it's worth. But if you're using her like this, you know, she's just a single target mage attacker who cannot self-heal herself, or her soldiers actually don't do that much damage either. So that's why, in comparison, she's slightly worse than Luna, because Luna will generally have a much higher attack value than Shafaniel does. Next, for your tank, you're going to choose between basically Ledin or Freya. In the tank choices, Ledin, even though he's off faction, it's okay because he can faction buff himself up. And Ledin is really considered the best PvE tank in the game. That's why most players of Princess Alliance will eventually switch to Ledin as their tank. Freya is usable, don't get me wrong. She can be used, but it can be quite hard to build up Freya. And that's because, from what I remember, she does not get her Gate of Fate until later on, which means you cannot unlock her 4th and 5th bond for most of the early stages of this game. That's a huge limiting factor, because the 4th and 5th bond is basic. When upgraded, it will basically give your tank a huge amount of hit points, defense, and magic defense increase, 13%. And the 5th bond gives attack, int, and skill increase of, once again, 13%. So not being able to unlock those two is a huge limiting factor in using Freya. In addition, one other key point is Freya not having a Gate of Fate early on means you cannot farm her shards. So you may be stuck using a 3-star or 4-star Freya. Maybe even a 2-star Freya, in fact. Whereas, you know, Ledin, you can basically farm his shards from day 1. So you can very rapidly raise up your Ledin to 4 stars or 5 stars. So that's one big problem with using Freya as your tank in the early stages of this game. In addition to that, Freya really has a massive drop-off in her combat performance. Until around level 35, she basically kills everyone who attacks her with fixed damage via her talent, via the Barb skill, via Lance Phalanx, right? Barbs, Lance Phalanx, and her talent doing damage equal to her hero's defense. However, as you level up, the enemies also have more and more hit points. And then the fixed damage via talent, Lance Phalanx, and Barbs are no longer able to kill off enemies. Without being able to kill off enemies, then there's just a massive drop-off in Freya's combat performance, because you have to mop up all the enemies instead of them all dying. So that's another reason why Freya is generally not recommended as the tank for Princess Alliance. It is possible to use her. You know, you'll struggle a bit more than if you were using Ledin, but it is possible. Just bringing up a quick screenshot. This is the tank. One moment, please. Here we go. So this is the Freya of a player on the on the international server, Daisuke Yuki, and you can see his Freya's power is 6,392. It's one of the best Freyas that I've seen, and he actually uses this Freya for both PvP and PvE purposes, primarily for PvP though, and it works great for him. So it's not like you cannot use Freya as a tank and succeed. You definitely can, but it's just, in my opinion, it makes things harder on yourself. So, last but not least, let's now talk about the parties that you would use to clear the Goddess Trials, or the higher level dragons. So these are just some sample parties that you can use. They're not absolutely required. You don't have to 100% follow these, but these are a pretty good guide to some ways of beating the dragons. So let's start with the fire dragon. And the fire dragon party is really quite standardized. You bring 1 melee DPS, 1 faction buffer, 1 tank, and 2 healers, because you'll need the healers to remove debuffs applied by the fire dragon. Thus, the party ends up being Shuri, Luna, and then you're going to bring your tank, which is either Ledin or Freya, and finally 2 healers between Liana, Tiaris, and Sophia. So, pretty standardized party. Next is the Ice Dragon. And Ice Dragon parties are usually 1 melee DPS, 1 faction buffer, a second ranged attacker to support your faction buffer, and 2 healers to keep everyone healthy. In this party, Shuri, your melee DPS, is mainly used to clear the mobs, and she will not fight against the Ice Dragon. Luna is there to faction buff and deal ranged attack damage on the Ice Dragon. Lana is also there to help take down the Ice Dragon, and the 2 healers keeps everyone healthy. Thunder Dragon is the one that's a bit different because it relies almost purely on the buff removal infantry character. So what you do in this fight is you bring the tank who will double as the faction buffer for the infantry character. You'll bring the infantry character himself and a damage dealer to help clear mobs. Finally, you'll bring 2 of your 3 healers in the other 2 spots. So if you're playing Legion of Glory beforehand, you're going to bring Ledin, who faction buffs Glory, which will buff up Elwyn and Shuri. Then you'll bring 2 of the 3 healers. If you're playing the Princess faction purely, it means you branch off into Origins of Light. And in that case, you would bring Freya as your tank and faction buffer. Luwin will be your infantry who will fight against the dragon, and you're also going to bring Luna, but Luna in this case will not bring a faction buff. She will be here to help you take down the enemies on the map. Plus, you'll want her to have an attack skill. So she'll run Wind Spiral, an attack skill, and then probably move again so that she can attack and retreat against the Thunder Dragon. Last but not least is the Dark Dragon, which is vulnerable to cavalry and flyers. So the most common method of taking down the Dark Dragon is once again to bring Shuri and Luna, right? Your flyer, DPS, and your faction buffer. You're going to bring a second damage dealer, which is really your choice of Leon, Angelina, or Sonya, depending on who you have. It can be any of these, Generally, I would say Sonya is the worst option. Leon is the best one, but Angelina will work perfectly fine as well. And then the final 2 slots will probably be once again 2 healers. So pick between Liana, Tiaris, and Sophia. So these would be the parties for clearing the dragons. So, in conclusion, Princess Alliance on the whole is not really an easy faction to start off with, simply because of the way the banners are built. The banner order and so on just does not make it very easy to play Princess Alliance right from the start. However, it is a fairly easy faction to transition to, especially from Legion of Glory. That concludes my video on the Princess Alliance. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching everyone, and on that note, Nitro out.